welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karkar Gold, your host of this series, in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and the narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also discuss how the chapters connect to the rest of the series, things like foreshadowing and spoilers, all of that. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are currently on. This is Chapter 82, Conflictable Composition. What's going on? I was wondering what I was called here for. Such a big production. The captains who run the Soul Society assembling just for me. Or maybe not. The captain of the 13th Company is missing. Where is he? He's sick. Again? Poor thing.
That's enough. Do you think you were called here to discuss a sick captain? We heard. You were out playing with the Ryoka without permission. And you let him get away. What happened? A captain should be able to kill 4 or 5 Ryoka with ease.
What? He isn't dead. Uh-oh.
What?
Gosh, I thought he was dead. Have my instincts begun to fail me?
Don't pretend you didn't know. We of the captain class can sense the disappearance of a being's spirit energy. Or were you so negligent that you didn't bother to take notice?
Here we go again. Stupid old men bickering.
I can't take it.
What's that? You think I let him away on purpose?
That's exactly what I think. Be silent, Kurosuchi. I'm the one asking questions. You stay out of it. Unless you'd like me to cut you.
Stupid. Oh boy.
Stop. This is disgraceful. Kenpachi and Kurosuchi, stand down. But now you have some idea of why you were called here, Gin. You acted independently without orders, and by allowing your target to get away, you committed a blunder unworthy of your rank. I want to hear your explanation. That is why I called this meeting. What do you have to say? What is your explanation? Gin?
Bleach, Chapter 82, Conflictable Composition. Thank you for the meal.
The law of the jungle.
You eat slow. What's wrong with that? That's just how I was raised. Hey, you haven't eaten much, Orihime. Are you full? Sure am. I'm stuffed. See? I'm full. It's okay. You don't have to do that. We'll pretend we didn't hear it. Actually, I thought I'd give my food to Ichigo. Oh yeah. He still hasn't shown up.
Whoa! The statue! The great Kukaku arm is falling! What's the spiritual pressure?
It's Ichigo. Let's go check it out. That fool, what do you think he's doing? What's that? What is it, Ganju? What's happening?
Sorry, sis. I taught him that little trick. I had no idea that this would happen.
You idiots! What are you doing? Solidify your spirit energy! Quickly! I did it! Good job, Ichigo! Thanks! You fool! Never break your concentration so suddenly. Duh? Didn't you hear what I said? I told you if any of you loses focus, it's boom! Didn't I? Did I say that, huh? Yes, you did, ma'am. Then did you do it on purpose? Thanks, Chad. That's right, if you didn't. Ugh, you're equally guilty, you fool. Why? You know why. It's your fault. No dinner for you. Ha ha! Take that! Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't got one. What? An explanation. I was careless. I have no excuse. So, punish me any way you like. Wait. Again. Emergency! Emergency! What? An intruder! Intruder in the Ch.82! All guardsmen to battle stations! Is it that Ryoka? I'll chase it a while. I've got nothing better to do. I want to see where it lands. That is it for Bleach chapter, what is this, 82, right? Conflictable composition? Something like that? Yep, 82, conflictable composition. I remember that one. Barely. But yes, lots of captains in this chapter, lots going on in this chapter, lots to discuss as we get to see a little bit more of these high-profile characters. So let's get right into it. We open where we left off, where Ichimaru Gin was approaching the captain commander of the Gotei 13, the 13 court guards, these guys, the heads of Soul Society, as it were. As you know, there are 13 different divisions, or 13 companies, basically, like military regiments almost, and they all have a captain. They also have a vice captain or a lieutenant, and then they also have various members underneath that, right? So, as we know, Rukia is a part of the 13th Division, as mentioned very much in brief. So her captain is not here. As mentioned, he was sick, but he's the only one missing. Otherwise, we do get to see a little bit of everybody here, and I got to try to kind of flux between these wildly different voices I'm trying to kind of embody for them, but we'll see if that works or not. Nevertheless, I like that we do get this shot from behind, because we didn't really get a good look at the folks on the left here. And so you get the back of the smaller captain's Zanpakuto. It's got this kind of star design to its guard, but otherwise it's slung around his back. So if you remember, he had a sash on his front, so that's how it keeps his sword in place. We also get to see more of the flowery design that's on the taller fellow over here to his left. One thing I will note, if you go back and you look at the initial time that Saraki Kenpachi showed up, and you come back and look at him here, his hair is a lot longer. I think he went from having much kind of smaller, like I guess, spikes of hair to longer ones. And you'll notice that over the series, that his hair sort of goes from less looking like he's a bald guy. Like, I mean, realistically, if you were to spike your hair that way, you would look a lot more like he does, right now, or even in the earlier chapter. But you'll see Kenpachi's hair just gets more and more voluminous as we progress throughout the series. I think, Kubo's doing some wild things with this guy's design. And a lot of these designs are pretty strictly different. And I mean, this is what sort of set the bar for having a bunch of factional leaders with drastically different designs that try to convey aspects of their personality, right? So whenever you look at, again, I come to Demon Slayer, because Demon Slayer takes so many notes out of Bleach's book. But all the pillars, or the Hashira, whatever way you want to interpret that, I suppose, they all have, they're very much inspired by the captains, right? They all have very distinctive designs. They're all the head of their own companies. They all have unique techniques, and they all, are kind of, at times, at each other's throats, right? They can be at odds, or they can work as, a team, that sort of thing. Ostensibly, they're all part of the same group. Same thing here, right? But if you've ever read any manga where it's been like, okay, well, here's the leaders, and it's like, okay, they're a group, but they have this very distinctive designs. A lot of that Bleach really made that popular. I mean, if I think about manga before Bleach, you would have much smaller groups, and they would usually fall under a singular leader that was like the real big bad guy. So I'm thinking of stuff like Yu Yu Hakusho, where you'd have characters like Toguro, who was like really the main bad, but then you'd have other guys like underling kind of fellows, whereas these guys all seem to share the limelight. You think of something like Dragon Ball, right? You have characters like Frieza, right? He's the real villain. The Ginyu Force are all just sort of underlings that have very similar, sort of designs. I mean, obviously Goldo and Raccoon and Jason Berger and all of them they're all very different, but they don't have as much, I suppose. I guess you can say that they're you can get a little bit from their designs. Like there's things like Raccoon being as buff as he is, although everybody in Dragon Ball Z is buff out of control other than Goldo. So I don't know. Anyway, but typically you'd have this hierarchy with a big boss at the top, and the underlings would have maybe less to distinguish them, or would be given less equal space. Whereas here, these are all the bosses, right? And so Bleach, I think, really kind of popularized that. And I mean, One Piece at the time would have been doing like the various what would you call them? The heads of like the Marine Corps, I guess. So they hadn't quite yet set out like One Piece really didn't have a final boss at that point, as far as I'm aware. I don't even know that you could really say One Piece even now has a final boss, like 1,000 chapters in. But maybe you see characters like Whitebeard or Blackbeard or whatever. Those sorts of characters, I think, are become big, but again, it tends to be. I remember a lot of One Piece tended to be, at least what I read of it was like, okay, here's this island or the arc, and there's like the big bad guy, right? So this is a deviation from that. Anyway, just wanted to mention that because again, I think people give Bleach a lot of, or they don't give it the credit that it's due. They tend to give it a lot more flack than I think it deserves, and they don't really see how influential it was, especially on Japanese readership and authors and creators who, I think are much more grateful and much more have a higher opinion of Bleach. I think Bleach is generally, as far as I understand, generally maybe a little bit more well received Japanese wise than it is elsewhere online. But yeah, we do get to see old Kenpachi there. We get a little bit of Mayuri here. Kurotsuchi. Kurotsuchi is the way that he's referred to. But yes, I like that Gin here is kind of, he's just kind of capping on what we've gotten so far, and he's saying like, oh hey, maybe I wasn't. Maybe you all have been hollow gathered for me, because he points out, of course, the missing party of the 13th, and it gets mentioned, of course, that he is sick. So we get the first line of dialogue from this fellow over here, who does not get named and seen, but seems very to the point. Doesn't even look over at Gin. So he seems to be, kind of no nonsense, which I do appreciate. I also like that we get another shot of him. I like the way that his hair kind of falls across. Yeah, he uses this kind of white outline to make it stand out across the black, which is I appreciate there. But I like that we get like kind of Gin with these little, like expressive moments. He's kind of just popping around, responding to things in tandem. I think really Gin's trying to get a rise out of people, which once more we get the sense that Gin is kind of trying to cause problems, right? That he enjoys getting these sorts of reactions, and we even see that he starts to smile as he gets addressed by Zaraki here. And of course, we come to the crux of the matter, which is that he did fight Ichigo and Ko. And, I love that he just blatantly lies here. He's like, oh yeah, I thought they were dead, right? Which of course he didn't. I mean, he could have very easily killed them. Like with the speed that he approached. If you remember, his initial strike happened on Jidambo before they were even aware of what was happening. So if it was his intent to kill Ichigo and their friends, they would be dead. But it does not seem that was the case. But he starts to kind of write that off. He has a little laugh about it, right? And so does Kurosuchi here, who, with these huge bulging eyeballs, sort of calls him out, right? Says that, once you're cat in class, you can sense whenever a being's spirit energy has disappeared. So there's no way that he didn't know. Like, he would have just been aware. Of course, our little friend over here insults everybody for being bickering, stupid old men. We can take it that he's the younger of them, possibly because he's shorter and shown as a little bit more kind of child looking. That said, I do like his hair. He's got kind of cool hair. This character ends up being fairly popular, as you can imagine. If you're just thinking about these designs, it's already, I think you can immediately already kind of start to tell, like, which ones of these characters would become popular if you weren't aware. I'm very curious, though. That's one thing that I wonder is people who haven't read the series at all, who don't really know these characters very well. I'm curious which ones of these, which of the captains you think is the most popular and the least popular, right? Which we don't even have them all named yet. So if you think in the comments, go ahead and try and guess. If you do know, keep it to yourself. But it's kind of interesting how the popularity sort of hashes out. And it's interesting also because the popularity of these characters doesn't quite seem to fit exactly how much Kubo certainly likes certain characters or not, because it seems like Kubo really likes to depict certain characters in a lot of different ways, whereas it seems like Kubo doesn't like to, or at the very least doesn't find places to put in these characters. Because now we have the balancing act of, well, you have now 13 very, very powerful characters, and one of them's sick. So really, you're already kind of neglecting the depiction of one of them, right? But I like that we do get to see a little bit of these panels shooting back and forth. We get this sense of contention between them, right? Lady over here calls them stupid. This guy's like, oh boy, Byakuya is just, he's not ready to deal with this. But our three essential kind of characters that are arguing, I like that they get called out here by their leader, who is this, seems to be kind of a nice looking old man at first, but he gets very serious very quickly, and we start to get the first really good look at what like overwhelming Rietsu or spiritual pressure would be like, right? Now, of course, we also get the explanation that this meeting was called in order to actually discuss Gin's actions, right? To discuss what was happening with the Ryoka. Now, Gin might be toying around because he knows that this other alarm is going to go off. The Ryoka are just going to invade again, right? That something's going to happen. But nevertheless, it seems as though this is the kind of Gin getting targeted down here, right? That he's got to answer for maybe, not killing our main cast. And that a captain should be decisive and actually not have that happen. But yeah, I love that we get this zoom in as this character, the leader of the Gote. He opens his eyes and everything sort of starts to get these very heavy lines kind of pushing down on the characters. And I love this zoom in on Gin's expression, that we really get him kind of under this pressure, but he hasn't broken. Now, conflictable composition, that could refer to exactly that, Gin's expression. That he is composed, but there's conflict around it. I mean, it's a bit of a nonsense jumble of words. Conflictable, something that's able to be brought into conflict, right? Or conflicting would be two things that are held at odds, but this is conflictable. And the composition is any arrangement of things, but you can also refer to someone as composed if they have arranged themselves in a cool manner, right? If they're unfazed by things. And certainly, Gin seems pretty composed despite being called out by the rest of the Gote 13, the rest of the 13 court squads here. So you have to wonder, does that chapter title really refer to him, or is it to our other group, which is certainly a composition of fellows, our Ryoka, right? As we swap back to that main plot. So again, that A plot, B plot. I do love that we have just like this placing down of bowls. You know, they're just eating kind of in a hallway, it almost seems like. The first bit of dialogue as Chad calls it, "Are you for eating slow?" is a bit funny. We get more gags from Orihime as once again she's doing that thing that we were talking about last chapter, where she's really neglecting herself and her own health, physically or emotionally, in order to try to help somebody else. I love that she has this big growl from her stomach. She punches it and it just kind of yips away. It's like, oh geez, Orihime, please don't. And of course, they know that Ichigo hasn't shown up. But here, kind of interesting enough, we get that use of that spiritual pressure again. And you might remember we had a little bit of this happen, I believe, even in the first chapter, whenever it was revealed that there was a hollow nearby, right? That sudden pressure. But this effect gets used pretty prominently moving forward. And so it's kind of interesting that we had that pressure from the leader of the Shinigami captains, and now we have it here again from the leader of our Ryoka. We have these pretty massive responses to it. And yeah, even the statue starting to fall. It gets mentioned by Ryu as, this spiritual pressure. And, of course, Orihime, being as perceptive as she is, she's able to recognize it as Ichigo, one way or another. Once again, we get our moon kind of looming over, this idea of this kind of looming threat, right? And as they rush to go and see what happens, Ganju's kind of fallen back. No one knows what to do because Ichigo is, and I like the urgency of a lot of this, that we kind of come from Kukaku's point of view as she's rushing down here, sees the rest of them outside the dojo, and then she flips around the corner, and as she throws open the door, we get to see sort of what she sees, right? Now, yeah, I was kind of considering perspective here, because I'm like, okay, Kukaku, you've got one arm, so I hope that this is your left arm, and that does make sense that the way that this is grabbing the door, it is the left arm. So, whew. But yeah, we do have here, panel, and then we get this massive panel of Ichigo with all the energy kind of exploding out of him almost. And she has to tell him to force it into the solidified form, right? Because essentially he's just making a bomb right now. I do like that we get this. This is I love the effect on this panel. Like this circle that's kind of around the other, and then it has that sort of effect where all the speed lines get cut off, as well as the shading. It really gives the sense of kind of this wild, otherworldly, sort of supernatural energy being sucked like all together into this orb. I like the expressions we get from our characters. I also do like that because of the height of our characters, we can kind of stack them like Orihime, Ryu, Chad, like that. It creates for a lot of really, I think, dynamic and interesting and, just fun panels in general. We also get a lot of reminders of course, less so for Orihime, but definitely, Uryu is so Sanri glove out, right? Like we got that panel earlier where he was putting down his food, but we'll often get reminded of his Sanri glove. And same thing, Chad's arm, like they're all kind of ready to go almost right there, right? But I love that, of course, Ichigo's great. Orihime is the first to praise him, and he looks so happy, right? Of course, we get reminded of what was told to us just a few chapters ago, right? Break your concentration, it'll blow up. I love that, of course, Chad shielded the others. I like that small sort of thing. I like that the moon almost kind of bookends the explosion. It's also a reminder that, this is all still happening at night here, as it does seem as though the Soul Society does have a night-day cycle. we cut back, and the moon's slightly overcast, as it seems as though, what the danger is being sort of obscured as we cut back to Gin, who says he doesn't have an excuse, he doesn't have an explanation, that he just says he was careless because it takes away his agency in the act, right? And that's ultimately what he's trying to kind of put it on, that, oh, well, because it's a lot harder to prove that there wasn't like a lack of something, or to prove nothing. Like, you could, if you want to prove you didn't do a thing, you can say, oh, well, you were X, Y, or Z, you're trying to do this, this, or this. But if he was just like, oh, well, no, I was colorless and I don't have an excuse, like, it's a lot harder to prove any sort of motive there whenever he's already saying that he doesn't have one, really, right? So it becomes kind of difficult for them to kind of pin him down. And of course, I like that Gin says, punish me any way you like. And this is, we know the sort of punishments that could mete it out. So either Gin really is this kind of carefree of a guy, or, whatever his plans that involve our main cast, he's willing to deal with the sort of dire punishments, or maybe he thinks he can elude them. Nevertheless, Aizen actually starts to approach Gin, and Gin has a pretty serious expression for a moment here. But then we get this ringing of the bell here, the just like a clapping of this, gong, basically. I will say Kurosuchi looks kind of cute down here with his big puppy dog eyes. Looks a little adorable from far away. Not that that Aizen and our other friend peeking in here aren't cute, but there's a little bit of surprise as there is an intruder here for them to respond to, and I like that we get shots of our various characters seriousing up. It's kind of strange here that we do get that shot of Zaraki Kapachi here among Aizen and this other fella. And then we flip side, and he's back over here behind the others too, over Gin and these two others. So, yeah. But we have an intruder in the Seirete, and they're wondering, of course, if it's the Ryoka. And Gin has what seems like a pretty serious expression for him, as of course he squirrels out of the sort of having to be responsible for what he did earlier. And if we thought, if the whole idea was that Gin was just trying to keep Ichigo and crew at bay, but not kill them, but also keep them out, then perhaps this might be a bit of frustration, as whatever his other plans that require them not to be around are getting interrupted as well again. Who knows, right? So if we're taking Gin to be one of the schemer type, and then not just take him at his word that he was just careless, that he was X, Y, or Z. Whatever Gin is up to, it seems as though this is a frustration in that, as he doesn't look like he's exactly happy with the situation. Though he could be just playing around. Who knows? I like that we get a little continuation of what we had before, where Karin decides that she is going to chase the hollow that's flying around. Trying to figure out how that goes, right? But that's it for this chapter. There isn't a ton to talk about. We don't get really a good look at all these captains in this chapter, even though they are present. So we do have a few kind of moments, but not a ton to really speculate on. A few interactions, but really it's mostly Kurosuchi and Zaraki and Gin interacting, and a little bit of the captain commander there. But otherwise, we get this kind of moment. I do love this shot of Ichigo, kind of like all stricken by this power that he's wielding. I think that's a really cool image. Again, the shading and the way that it's done, especially up in his brow and everything. I'm a fan of that. Otherwise some shocked images from old girl from the Shiva Kaku. So yeah, it's neat. I wonder if also if this is so much shading as he's literally just dimpling in the floor or what. But again, we get the sense, yes, Ichigo is very, very powerful, which we've had that confirmed to us before. I mean, in the Minos Grande encounter, right? We had where Ichigo's spiritual power is just so overflowing that Uryu had to fire the arrows off and shred his arm up to save him. So we get that sense that Ichigo, that sort of no nozzle, full blast kind of guy that he is. Anyway, yeah, as far as the chapter goes, I do like the interactions. I do think this chapter gives us a little bit of intrigue, and we're starting to understand maybe where these different captains stand, how they stand in relation to each other. We get a little bit of their temperaments whenever they're put under pressure in these different ways. I will say, Gin is a favorite character of mine, and I think this is a chapter that kind of starts to really solidify that character for me. I mean, I liked him from the second that he showed up. I think his Shikai is really cool, right? The ability for his sword to release and kind of do this split second like rowing thing. It's very neat. I like Shinzo a lot. But I'm a fan of its design. I'm a fan of Gin's design. I'm a fan of kind of his nature and his attitude. As far as like how he approaches things, that there's a sort of, especially here, it's kind of hard to pin down exactly where he's coming from or what his motivations are. But I like that he is a character that invites you to think about him in those ways. Whereas it's like whenever you start to think about like, okay, well, if there is some sort of conspiracy, if there is some sort of thing to try and like get Rukia worked down, right? For what purpose and who of these? If it goes all the way to the captain level, right? If someone here is pulling the strings, who all is actually a part of it? And if it's any one individual, then like which of them, right? And so far, we don't really. I mean, we know Byakuya, but it doesn't seem like he's really. If he's involved, that's a pretty heavy twist, right? Gin seems to be the obvious kind of red herring character, where he's the one that a lot of suspicion gets heaped on right away. So you're kind of resistant to call him out, right? Because it's typical mystery writing. You have a character that's too suspicious to be, the actual one, right? That's very obviously under scrutiny from the beginning. So it kind of lets you to feel a little bit better because you're looking at other characters. You're not as barred in as the characters that are in this situation are. But then, we have characters like we know Zaraki already proposed to kill Rukia even before the execution, right? He said that he would cut her head off before the execution. So, maybe there's something there. Who knows? But we really haven't gotten a lot from the other characters. All that we know, really, is that one of them's sick, and that what's his face, Hitsugaya, the genius, was not around. But they're, everybody's busy, right? So assumably Hitsugaya, who we have not had named here yet, is either present or he's the one that's missing. But if he was sick, you would think that Matsumoto would have mentioned that, right? So assumably the prodigy Hitsugaya is among these, though we do not know yet who he might be. Otherwise, though, this is about all that we get for the chapter. I do like what we have, but it is mostly set up. I think it calls to an interesting action, and we have to wonder who the intruder is, if it is Ichigo and friends, if this is slightly out of sequence and we haven't seen them blast off yet, or if there is perhaps another intruder altogether. So, it's worth considering. Nevertheless, good chapter, solid chapter, interesting depiction of these characters, leaves you a lot to think on, which is always welcome. But let's talk about spoilers. Let's talk about how this connects to the rest of Bleach. And immediately, of course, we can talk about kind of the different characters in interaction here, right? That Gin, of course, is very, like, he calls them out as, he tries to even calls this attention to himself. They're like, oh, this is all assembled just for me, or maybe not, right? Like, it seems like Gin is almost testing the room to see, if anybody is aware of their larger plans. And And so I love, of course, Tosin doesn't look around because he's blind, but also he's very curt. He just says, and I like that. As Jushiro gets mentioned, of course, Tosin immediately answers with him being sick. Tosin would know all about people getting sick. I don't know. I think of no, if I'm going to talk about someone who knows all about people being sick, I would say it's Byakuya, but that's a pretty low blow. Anyway, thinking about his wife, I think it's technically, I think, Tokinada that had Tosin's wife killed, or Tosin's not wife, but his beloved, his good friend, right? But not Hisana. Hisana died of illness. As we know, the illness that plagues Jushiro is, in fact, the Mimihagi. So it's interesting that, of course, that gets mentioned as early as here. And, I have to wonder if there's the idea is that perhaps it's maybe reacting a little bit to Ichigo, right? Because we know Ichigo is kind of distant relation to the Soul King in a way. So you have to wonder, maybe, but maybe not. I don't think it's that ahead of time. But I think the real reason why Jushiro isn't here is just because, it builds a little bit more intrigue for us to have somebody that's missing and then the mention is sick and then again being brought up, right? There's this chronically sick person and maybe he uses that illness as a front to get around and do other things. But I like that Gin is willing to engage with these things otherwise to kind of play this out. And like I said, I do think he's kind of trying to start shit. Which, I like his kind of flippant answers. Now, of course, Kenpachi being focused on, like, killing is on point. And we get our first few lines from Mayuri, which I do think I slipped up and called Mayuri, even though he's only referred to as Kurotsuchi in this chapter. But I do appreciate that we get a little bit from him. Now, Hitsukai looks maybe a little less angular and ridiculous than he did last appearance. Like, we look at him right here compared to, like, right there. Like, his eyes look bigger. He looks almost more like a 2000s sort of alternate scene, like goth comic character, like some Jonan Vasquez sort of character almost here. Whereas his proportions seem a little bit more, like, especially the size of his eyes, I don't know. Seems a little bit more relaxed. Maybe Kubo's line work is just a little bit more confident on his design here than it is elsewhere. Or on that first appearance. But I always remember seeing Hitsukai's first appearance. Every time I look back at it, I'm like, what? I mean, same thing for Mayuri's, but Mayuri's design changes, intentionally, whereas Hitsugaya mostly has the same sort of hair and facial structure and everything for the majority of the series, right? Of course, Mayuri, I do like that Mayuri brings up the whole deal of, like, just having that awareness of one being spirit energy, their Reiatsu and everything. That, because we know as captains fight, they start to, like, anybody on that level is able to perceive just with their, like, perception of Reiatsu, right? And Reishi. And so they could even do that blindfolded. Which assumably Tosin's Bankai robs that sense of Reishi as well. But we can talk about that whenever we get to that. Nevertheless, yeah, I like that, the technicalities of that are brought up by Mayuri. And so he brings up that sort of technical side. Of course, Hitsugaya being Hitsugaya, and he's so cool. He's just so over all the bickering of old men. There's a certain exasperation that I think Hitsugaya shares with Matsumoto, and I kind of appreciate that, because you think about, like, these different captains and vice captains and how they're paired, and a lot of the pairings make sense, but there's some of them that you start to call out, right, or that you start, like, that give you question. And I think that's one that, I think a lot of people tend to kind of question Matsumoto and Hitsugaya, outside of like an SS sort of pairing, which surprisingly little of that, actually. Usually I would see Hitsugaya ship with like young characters, which is weird because he's several not thousand, but 100-year-old Shinigami anyway. But, you'd see him like paired with a Karen of all characters. It's like, what? Okay. I guess. But anyway, outside of fan shipping, I think that shared sort of exasperation that they both have. There's a certain attitude that I think they share that makes them kind of natural allies and makes them a little bit more of a cohort. But I mean, there's definitely some that like I think people are willing to kind of question more. Like Omaida, of course, gets brought up a lot because it's like, well, isn't he supposed to be a ninja, part of this, ninja force, right? The Squad 2, which is linked to the Omnitscudo assassins and everything. And it's like, well, there's more going on there, Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get there. Right now, I mostly want to focus on this chapter. Nevertheless, I like that Gin expresses exactly the truth, that he, thinks that he let him get away on purpose, and to which Mary's like, yes. Yeah, of course, Genryusai pipes up. He tries to kind of get a handle on things, but as soon as he starts to kind of apply force, Gin is totally okay with this, but then they get called away, right? As far as other connections here, I guess we can see how Orihime made it through Hueco Mundo and not having to eat all of her meals. She was just saving them from Ichigo, or punching herself in the stomach. Yeah, whenever we get down here for Ichigo kind of manifesting his spiritual pressure, that all makes sense, like, obviously, Ichigo, big Ryetsu energy. So, wielding that is something that he kind of has to come to learn throughout the entirety of the series, right? I do, again, love how excited he looks for this, and that, yet again, Orihime is kind of the one to be there and support him. Would have liked it if Orihime kind of blocked this with a shield, but instead we got blocked with Chad, which I think fits well in that one panel anyway. But, would have been cute to kind of see that. I'm glad that Chad does get a moment, though, here before our team will have to split up, and then Chad will be sort of non-extant for a lot of the rest of this arc. So little Chad moments. Interestingly enough, you have to wonder what kind of the sort of interaction that Aizen and Gin are going to have here. And this is one of the reasons why I go back and forth on whether or not Gin keeping the Ryoka from getting into the gates of Soul Society was part of Aizen's plan or not, right? Because it seems as though Aizen's sort of about to address that here, and Gin has a moment, like almost serious moment, as Aizen steps forward to kind of say something to Gin, but we never get the conclusion of that. So we get that there's some tension there, and I wonder if it's just supposed to be like for show or whatever, or if he's trying to kind of, touch base with Gin about exactly how their plan's going along or something, right? There's supposed to be some sort of interaction that's supposed to be telling there. And I almost wonder if it's meant to be, Aizen maybe having a moment of realizing that Gin is 100% on board with his plans. I don't know. Because Aizen does let on later that, he always knew that Gin was going to betray him or whatever, which is like, sure, bud. But I think this could be a moment of Aizen having an actual realization, especially if you look at his expression in this top panel whenever Gin's like, oh yeah, punish me any way you like, and Aizen's like, I wonder if Gin almost did that on his own because, one, he knew that it would keep Ichigo and company alive, and two, like, he knew that maybe being punished in this way would give him some way, or like maybe being involved in this way would maybe give him some avenue towards defeating Aizen. I don't know. you know? It's curious. Like, you wonder why he doesn't just run over and grab, like, if he's, I suppose he has to set up an appropriate enough sort of moment of betrayal, but it's like, if Gin is aware of how Kyoko Suigetsu works, then, when does the perfect time to come to really let his killing intent come out and to grab the thing so he isn't under illusion and stab Aizen with his Bankai, right? You have to consider. And I don't know. Like, why not here, right? Well, why not here is because we're at chapter 82. But you have to consider that. And I don't know if maybe this was Gin trying to kind of push that forward or what. It's hard to tell. Anyway, I do not remember which invader this is. Honestly, I don't know if this is. I'm pretty I'm completely drawing a blank on exactly what this warning's happening. Though I do get the feeling that this is part of their scheme. If not, then because I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to remember exactly the sequence because I know we find Aizen pinned up later, right? And so, both of them are kind of spreading just enough of the seeds for Gin being suspected, but and then of course driving more suspicion onto Hitsugaya. But there's a lot going on here, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on in the next chapters. I don't remember if this is the Ryoka invasion or if this is just some 100% Aizen planned nonsense. As far as like the significance between Gin's expression back here, I do feel like this is something that's outside of maybe Gin's understanding of what the plan was, right? That as far as Gin's schemes go, they're being kind of foiled here. So I like as far as like the spoiler kind of interest that I have in this chapter, I think the move of this little arc is sort of Gin shows up and feels like he's kind of in control because what he was successful in what he did, and then whatever they're going to do is not going to be able to impact his plans really. But then this other thing that he couldn't account for happens, and I don't know that this is really put on. I think this is maybe honest sort of reaction from Gin. Anyway, that's it that I have for this chapter. Thank you so much for following me along. Let me know if you noticed anything that I didn't. It's a bit of a shorter video comparatively. I'd like to keep them even shorter if possible. I want to be concise, but I also want to say anything that is significant. And I felt like I had less things to really pick out this time. So, if you noticed anything that I didn't, please do let me know. Otherwise, you can always support this channel. If you watch this far, please give this a like. There are other methods of support too. You can always support me over on the Patreon, where all the funds that you give will help to go towards the longevity of the channel. Longevity? Oh boy, words. Oof. But that's it for me. I wanted to say thank you to all the people that do support me on Patreon, though. You're seeing a list of everyone there right now as of making this video. I really do appreciate that. And if you want to support any amount, you can get your name right up there, too. Whew. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for, just being a fan of Bleach in this year. Whenever you're watching this, Bleach is great, and I'm glad that you enjoy it, or at least enjoy enough to watch these videos. Spread the word, because I love this series. I love talking about it. I love seeing new people get into it. I love sparking interest in old fans alike. So, if I do any of that, then that makes me happy. As always, this has been Karakura Gold, reminding you spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.